So, you may have already seen the thumbnail. I wanted to talk about what I would call Bionicle's first worst set. First bad set. Like, truly. Here's the thing. I mentioned in a previous video that 2003 saw a bit of a change for Bionicle. Not for the better, not for the worse necessarily, but a change that I think was necessary. And I defend it for 2003. That change is budget. Why? What do I mean? Well, when we see the Borak cowl, we know that they are a blatant recreation, recoloring, rebranding of the original Borak sets. And in context to that, I think it's kind of bad, but I defend them in the sense that Bionicle Lego in general really needed to sort of put a lot of their attention on the Vahki sets, which were coming in the later half of that year, which meant obviously devoting more time to the development of those sets and of course of the Makuta that would go with them, but also it meant a lot of focus on the parts involved as well. More budget on the parts for the Vahki meant less budget on the parts for the second wave for that year, and so the Borak cowl were honestly kind of the perfect choice. The Borak in and of themselves are basically a perfect platform, and yeah, though, while you can definitely criticize the Borak cowl for being these just slightly shinier versions of them, at the very least, if you like the Borak, objectively you like the Borak cowl as a set. Maybe not in concept, maybe not in the context of the story, and maybe not if you bought any of the other Borak sets. But the Borak cowl for me were good in one way, because I remember the early 2000s and I remember just how hard it was to find the Borak that I wanted. Stores were always sold out of like specific ones, right? So it was harder for me to collect, but Borak cowl were everywhere. Everywhere. That's what happens when you produce a set for 2 years, right? 2004, though, saw another bit of ambition in the development of the Toa Metru sets which essentially reformatted what came before, taking basically the idea of the Vahki in sheer terms of posability and just improving upon it in a lot of ways. I don't think that they're perfect sets by any means, and they absolutely have their flaws as well, because the 2000s also introduced us to our first official true clone sets too. I don't call the Toa Metru clone sets as many people tend to do, because they have differences between them. Subtle differences in some ways, sure, but that's in part because of just the sheer number of unique parts. There weren't that many in general. However, obviously by 2002, we got the Borak sets, and though those are 100% clone sets, it makes sense given that they have to roll up into a ball. That's a really hard thing to design for, and to design it 6 different times uniquely, that's a pretty tall order. 2003 obviously gave us the Vahki, which were also clone sets, but I think they somewhat justified it by their story, right? Being these sort of sons of Makuta, if you will. It makes at least some sense to me that, yeah, they are clones. They are all built identically, and it's not to facilitate any sort of function or feature in this case. Sure, you can fold them up and put them back in the canister, but that was true for every set that came before. No, rather, it was because, again, it saves that budget, and also it ties it into their role as the sons of the Makuta. 2004, the Toa Metru gave us what I would consider clone sets as well, and although they did have some differences, the height of the waist or where the neck was placed, it was a lot less ambitious than the Toa Metru. Now, none of the sets that I've mentioned so far are what I would consider the worst set from early Bionicle, or the first bad set. I think they all had their strengths, they all had their weaknesses, but a set and a wave that I think truly focused near solely on weaknesses was the Vahki. These guys, right here. I realized that when I built this for this video, I forgot to actually include the gear in the function, but bear with me. It is the same function as the Vahki sets, although it uses a gear on the back rather than a knob to grab onto it, which I don't know if there's a specific reason for that. Probably to exclude unique parts in the set. Sure, fine, okay, makes some sense. But the Vahki, to me, while also being budget sets, absolutely, right? The leg is one of the only unique pieces in here, as well as the whatever you want to call this neck piece up here, the head and all of the pieces that go with that head and the weapons. So while there are definitely more unique pieces in this than something like the Borak cowl, there's still pretty few. And that's, of course, to make some room, some budget for those Metru Toa, and even the Metru Matoran for that matter, right? Because those sets introduced a lot of unique pieces, there were a lot less of them here. And I don't think that's a bad thing in and of itself. It gave us recolors of this arm piece here, recolors of this foot, although granted, way too overused, even recolor of this piece here, which came in some pretty fantastic colors too. But at the end of the day, the sets are kind of bad, in my opinion. Because here's the thing. in order for LEGO to sell these sets, they had to give them some kind of creative functionality, right? Because otherwise people are going to call them out for what they are. These aren't sons of the Makuta, and they do represent what the Rakshi represented, but I don't think they do so in as ambitious a way as the Rakshi. While the Rakshi were different from anything that came before, this is very blatantly, very clearly, essentially the Rakshi Cal, if you think of it, right? Yes, it is different, sure, absolutely. But there's a lot of similarities that go on here, and in some ways it actually loses functions, like the wrist, for example. And I'm not exactly sure why that is the case, other than, again, to reduce the parts count. Rather, when I look at these sets and I understand what the function is supposed to be, what the main feature, the main draw of these sets is supposed to be, flipping the head around, flipping the arms around, and folding the legs down, you get a crawler, and I'm not impressed. This looks clunky. It looks bad, to be honest. It's also pretty unable to look up in the first place, which is something I think I would want from a crawler, something that's a little more posable than this, and it's just not here. So what was the point? When I look at these sets, I have to wonder, I have to think to myself, was LEGO happy with this? I mean, maybe. I don't know. It's definitely different from what came before, and having the ability to transform from a two-legged machine into a four-legged machine, or build, or whatever you want to consider the Vahki, is neat. It's admirable, but it ain't doing it. Worse still is that this is the first time that we'd ever seen a set not come with a mask at all. This set has nothing. I mean, it has discs, but those are the same discs you could get from anywhere else. And although you could get copies of this that came with the Vahki, very clearly a way to just get LEGO to say, please, goddammit, buy this. You could still get the Vahki from the canister set, of which you would get several of these as well. I think these are probably some of the worst selling sets from Bionicle, I would imagine, at least from the first several years, maybe all of the first years, right? 2004 is an odd year in general, and though there are absolutely aspects of it I like, even in that time, even before 2005 was released, even when I went out of my way to buy Vahki for the first time, my first Toa Metru, right after he released, I built him and I was like, oh, this is neat. Sure hope all the rest of these sets aren't gray. Because that's the thing. The gray was novel in 2003, and it helped to tie the Rakshi together with Makuta. Obviously, clearly, it was also a budget constraint, right? Not recoloring those pieces meant saving a lot of money on recoloring those pieces. It doesn't cost a whole lot, but that's a lot of pieces you'd have to recolor. So, like, it adds up, especially with each copy of the set. So having them all just be dark gray makes some sense, but then you have to give them a story reason why. And Makuta's color being dark gray made sense. It was kind of the perfect marriage if you think about it. Because Makuta wasn't black as a primary color, which is a good way to subvert expectations. He's the character of shadows after all, so not making him black is pretty cool. But we also had Earth as an element, which featured primarily black characters. And then we look at something like Onuanuva, who has dark gray on him, we see that they reduced that dark gray a little bit in the form of those arms. Those arms got shorter, lessening the overall impact of that dark gray on that character, and thus making it stand out even more with Makuta. If you had a team of all 6 Toanuva and then Makuta standing behind them, he would look different from the rest, and that's exactly what it needed to be. And it was really smart. On top of that, obviously the dark gray was also used in both the Goku set, a bit, not much, but some, but also more heavily in the Usul Crab set, right? The Puku and Takua set. And that also made sense since there were combinations going around. So I think all around LEGO had a lot of synergy in 2003. But then tell me, why are the Toa Metru dark gray? Why are the Vahki dark gray? There's no reason for them to be other than to save budget. And yeah, sure, you can say it's to match this darker, grittier tone, and sure, but that's like the number one criticism I see people make of the Toa Metru, is that they're dark gray and the color is boring. And one of the first mods I see, there's a fantastic video, by the way, by R.R.Slugger, and I would highly recommend you go and check it out too, where he talks specifically about the Toa Metru. And I basically agree with every one of the points he raised in that video. I'll have to watch it again because it's been about a month since I've seen it at least. But the point I'm trying to make is that they are fantastic sets, but they're not designed the way they're designed for any particular reason. There's no story reason why they have to be gray or why they have to be clones. They are that way because it just involves less development time and it involves less overall budget. And that's fine. You can get away with that, absolutely. But the Vahki are where it really screams at that point. It's like, okay, why? Like, why? Why? We have these giant eye stalk pieces, and on first glance, like, I get it. It introduces a second color to these guys that is very important, sure. But it's big. It's clunky. It's obnoxious. And it really exemplifies the fact that it's a brain stalk and not eyes. Every Toa, near every set had a brain stalk up until this point where the eyes would stick out of the back to help pipe light in. And that worked, but when you viewed the character from the front, you saw eyes. You didn't see brain stalk. But here, I can see why they made the mistake of putting eyes in the wrong position on Nadiki's box art. And in honestly, a lot of the promotional work too, because where are they? Like, yeah, we know where they're supposed to be, right here. But it just blends in with the amorphous mask that goes behind it. They don't stand out like eyes should. And honestly, I think it's one of the worst features about this set, because if this design was reduced, was made smaller, it would be able to look up higher, not much higher, but higher. And that's not me praising the platform here, because I would honestly scrap this whole set. But at the very least, you would get a lot more out of it, I think, if you reduced the size of that brain stalk. But we understand why it has to be the way it is in the first place, in order to facilitate this. And on first glance, having these disc pieces shoehorned into all of our sets from 2004, nearly all of them anyway, makes sense. It's the collectible, it's the MacGuffin from this wave, right? I get it. But I have a couple of issues with it, because we got this disc specifically with Vahki. And people were upset that we didn't get any of the others. Like, there was art of the other versions of these created, but we never got them. And I think, for one thing, this should have been included at random, having one for each of the other Toa Metru in those Kanoka disc packs, so you had something to buy it for. In much the same way as you could get the infected Kanohi Hao occasionally from boxes of mass packs in the early 2000s, this could have been a pretty cool little incentive to buy, because they only would have come in those Kanoka disc packs, with the exception of this coming with Vahki, of course. And also, it would help to make them feel more special, because remember, these discs were the things the Toa Metru were after, but all of the Metru Matoran came with them. Okay, that makes some sense. They played a role in the story, but then all of the Vahki came with them too. And it's like, okay, so how many of these great discs actually are there, right? I know in the story there's more than 6, absolutely, but like, there's supposed to be 6 very special ones. Nothing really sets them apart, though, other than a handful of numbers, and that, to me, it doesn't do it for me. You know, gold masks aren't special because like a number on the back side of them is different. They're a different color. Silver masks too. And although I don't know if silver masks ever actually played a role in Bionicle, I was thankful for having them at the very least. And I always like to give them my own special role, because I ignore the lore all the time. When I see something like this, I see how long it is, and I see how it needed to be that length in order for it to function, giving you these sort of finger pads on the side and good accessibility to be able to squeeze it and use the function. And although occasionally it doesn't work, sometimes you'll have the disc kind of flop upward instead of outward, or sometimes you flip the character over and it doesn't quite hold on and falls out. For the majority of the time, it does work, and it works well enough. No, rather, what I would have liked to have seen is, instead of having this be what you pinch to close these, maybe have something in the front like this appendage here, and then design a version of this where you basically cut all of what I'm covering up off, and then insert an axle hole on each side, have them be 2 separate pieces, left and right, or even make them in a way where they can be used upside down so that you only have to make 1 copy and it can be mirrored. I don't know how that works exactly, because yeah, the disc launcher, I've done a bit of research into how and why it works too. They are asymmetric side to side. There's a reason for that. I'll cover that maybe in a separate video. Point being, though, at the very least, designing something so that it can be utilized from the front here, or even from the bottom here, or heck, even having something where when the head is posed like this, if bending these could bend these mandibles together too, having the arms kind of collide with it, so that when you push the arms all the way forward, when you use that function and it punches with its arm or whatever, it also shoots the disc. Does that make sense? Because it would interact with those little appendages. I'm not a toy designer. I don't know exactly how to design that, but you see the point I'm trying to get at. And it still preserves the front shape of the design, although I would say make the eyes a little more apparent, of course. And so a mask like the Kowalsi, for example, from Toa Iruni would make a lot more sense, because it is designed to look like a Vahki head, right? So you still preserve a lot of the important stuff there, but you don't have this giant mask sticking out of the backside that just makes it, I don't know. One of the other reasons I'm not a big fan of the Vahki has to do with their weapons too, because again, talking about amorphous blobs, the weapons feel that way. For the first time ever, I have my hands on weapons I can't truly identify what they're supposed to be. I identify that, yeah, it has pistons and Bionicle-related stuff adjacent to it, but I can't tell you why or what it is. When I look at sets from the Mata sets, for example, I see a fire sword, I see an ice sword, I see an axe, I see claws, I see a hook, I see kickers. The Toa Metru, even then, are still readily identifiable as to what their weapons are supposed to be. With maybe Vagama's being the exception there, I can still see, okay, jetpack. Kind of a strange weapon, sure, but when you see that it shoots fire, then you could think of it as a flamethrower jetpack, I guess, right? It's not shaped like anything that we would see in real life, but at the end of the day, I can understand it, I can visualize it, and I can sort of compartmentalize what it's supposed to be. But this, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, I know if I got hit by this, I wouldn't like it, clearly. You know, it's a big mass of what I would assume would be metal, right? And it has hooks on it. So, like, I get that it is a thing, but is it a hook? Is it a sword? Is it a staff? In what way is this a staff? It doesn't fit any of those ideas in my head. And I think it's one of the issues because many of these weapons just look weird. Like this, I don't find myself using this on mocks very often. And that's not to say I find myself using a lot of the other ones, but I have more use cases for the other ones. But something like this, what is it? What is this, calipers? Is it a monkey ring? Like, what am I seeing here that's supposed to make sense other than, oh yeah, shove pistons in it, people will understand it's a Bionicle piece? How? You know? This is the first time I've seen sets like this that I can't identify. And the Paraka do this too, but it makes more sense with the Paraka since we know that they're kind of kit bashers in a lot of ways. Like Avok's thing is making weapons. So if you just go at it thinking about that, like there could have been a lore reason why these look like random masses. And this is probably the best, I would argue, and I imagine Lego would probably agree, seeing how many other sets this one appeared on. Because at the very least, this looks like a sword. What kind of sword? I don't know. And when I read in the book that this is a staff, how? Where? It's a sword, obviously. The point I'm trying to get at is that, at the very least, making the weapons identifiable makes them feel more relatable. Now, at the end of the day, these are robots, but are they really? Like, from a lore perspective, they're robots. But if I handed this to you, would you say it's a robot in any way that's different from the Toa Metru or the Toa Mata or the Borak or the Rakshi? No, of course, you'd have no context here to know that this is a robot other than maybe it not having a mask. And is that just Lego's way of justifying why there's no mask here? It's goofy, is all I'm trying to say. And again, I know why they didn't do a multi-piece pincher mandible thing here. Again, it reduces parts. It reduces unique parts as well. So, like, I do understand why decisions were made to make this set. Do I think they are bad? Not necessarily. Do I hate you for deriving pleasure from them? Yes, of course. No, of course not. I think the Vahki are fine. They're great sets to collect and use pieces from. The Visorak, I think, do it well. And in fact, the Visorak feel like what the Vahki were trying to be. Because in my opinion, the Visorak, although, yes, based around a very heavily specialized piece, I can look at that piece at least and say, okay, that's that set's mask. It's not a mask, obviously. It doesn't come off, but nor does the Hordika head, you know. It's just that is the set's identifier, if you will. And at the very least, the Visorak weren't clone sets. They were close enough to be clone sets to be similar to the Toa Metru. Bringing the vibrancy back definitely helped. And I think that is why I would consider the Visorak sort of the highlight of, well, definitely of 2005, but even potentially of like 2004. There are a lot of ways where I think that if I had seen the Visorak in 2004, they would have probably still sold well. And even then, they weren't that ambitious. They just introduced a few more pieces that were new, I think, than the Vahki did. I'll have to do the math on that. I don't know. They did use a lot of older pieces, too. And in a lot of ways were precursors to what sets we'd follow. But yeah, it's interesting. 2004 is an experimental time. 2005, Metru Nui in general, is an experimental time for Bionicle because it was trying to find a different identity than what came before. But I think in a lot of ways, it tried to stray too far. Or in a lot of ways, it tried to stray too close to the sun, even, you know? I don't know if it knew what it wanted to be. I just know it felt like it wanted to be its own thing. And it didn't have a full grasp on what that thing was just yet. The story definitely got ambitious, sometimes too ambitious. It got complicated, sometimes too complicated. But at the end of the day, the Vahki are trash. All right, no, I think they're not great. That's my opinion. But of course, if you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below. Maybe the Vahki are your first sets. Maybe they're your favorite sets. Maybe you can recognize that they're not the best sets in the world, or maybe not the worst sets in the world either. Of course, all of that can be talked about down there in the description. Of course, be friendly about it, but you can check out the Discord, Instagram, and Patreon, all of which are linked in the description. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe because it helps the channel out. See you in the next one. Take care.